You've been my lawyer, you've been my teacher, my friend indeed. Oh, you brought me from a mighty long way, a mighty long way.
Our reading this morning is from a letter from Paul to Philemon, and it's from the Message version of the Bible, verses 1 through 22. Paul, Paul, am a prisoner for the sake of Christ, here with my brother Timothy. I write this letter to you, Philemon, my good friend and companion in this work. Also, to our sister Aphia, to Archippus, a real trooper, and to the church that meets in your house. God's best to you, Christ's blessing on us. Every time your name comes up in prayer, I say, oh, thank you, God. I keep hearing of the love and faith you have for the Master Jesus, which brims over to other believers. And I keep praying that this faith we hold in common keeps showing up in the good things we do, and that people recognize Christ in all of it. Friend, you have no idea how good your love makes me feel, doubly so when I see your hospitality to fellow believers. In line with this, I have a favor to ask of you. As Christ's ambassador, and now a prisoner for him, I wouldn't hesitate to command this if I thought it was necessary, but I'd rather make it a personal request. While here in jail, I've fathered a child, so to speak, and here he is, hand-carrying this letter, Onesimus. He was useless to you before, and now he's useful to both of us. I'm sending him back to you, but it feels like I'm cutting off my right arm in doing so. I want it in the worst way to keep him here as your stand-in to help out while I'm in jail for the message. But I don't want to do anything behind your back, make you a good deed that you hadn't willingly agreed to do. So maybe it's all for the best that you lost him for a while. You're getting him back for good now, and no mere slave this time, but a true Christian brother. That's what he was to me, and he'll be even more than that to you. So if you consider me a comrade in arms, welcome him back as you would me. If he damaged anything or owes you anything, chalk it up to my account. This is my personal signature, Paul, and I stand behind it. I don't need to remind you, do I, that you owe your very life to me? Do me this big favor, friend. You'll be doing it for Christ, but it will also do my heart good. I know you well enough to know you will. You'll probably go far beyond what I've written. And by the way, get a room ready for me. Because of your prayers, I fully expect to be your guest again. The word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God. I appreciate so much the ability to be back with you. I've been kind of in and out for the last month, and thank you, and found out what a difficult thing to do to write under deadline. And I'm grateful for you. Well, we start off this month talking about keep practicing love until we get it right. Because when we say love, I love you, it means nothing until behind it are the actions. It means nothing until we literally continue to impact the lives of people. And in the next few Sundays, we're going to be talking about not just loving. I know it'd be nice to talk about all the good things, but the difficulties, the hard part of practicing that love, of putting it in place. And this particular Sunday, we're going to look at Philemon, because Philemon is an interesting text. It's only 335 words in the Greek. That's all it is. It's a lot more in English because, we're verbose. But it's only 335 words. And it is a personal letter. And I love the way that you read it this morning, because it is a personal letter. He's writing it to a friend. The very basis of this letter is friendship. The very basis of this letter is people who know each other, talking to each other, and helping each other to love not only themselves, but also to love the people around them. Here's the thing. Some people who are your friends is somebody else's enemy. I know it's a shocker, because you probably think that everybody you know is a wonderful person. You probably can't even imagine that anybody could have a problem with them, but the truth of the matter is, our friendship pattern is very convoluted. Somebody that you love, that you care about, that's amazing to you, can be a total jerk to somebody else. Whether they are or not, that's the way they're perceived. It's also true that within the Pauline line, or in the time of the Romans, Paul also was in the middle of something that just put people in opposition to one another. And by that I mean, the guy that he's writing him about is a slave. Now this particular passage of Philemon has been, how shall I say, people aren't happy about this book. Because they look at it from the woke generation, and I am not against wokeness, but this is a problem. They look at it and say, no, Paul should have said, he should have said he's a slave, and you should let him go. That's what he should have said. But in the Roman society and in the time that he's living, Paul actually is also friends with someone who not only owns slaves, but someone who doesn't even understand what that means. Just like you're friends with someone who might be an enemy to someone else, you also may be friends with someone who might be in a different power relationship with someone, really decent people who don't understand what it means. It doesn't surprise me, therefore, when we begin to have these discussions in our society, that people get upset when we say things like white supremacy or sexism or any of those names, because people go, who, me? Right? Because we want to think of ourselves as good people. We want to think of ourselves as understanding in relationships and saying, there is no intention to harm, and there is no intention in Philemon to harm Onesimus, because he didn't understand that slavery is by definition harmful. Now, it is not the slavery of the Americas that we're talking about. However, I love scholars who try to look at this and say, well, it wasn't so bad slavery, like there's good slavery and bad slavery. It wasn't so bad. It was bad because freedom was being taken away. It's always bad. And also the Roman society itself, and I love what a scholar said about this. You have to understand, for Rome, freedom was a privilege that only some people had. So he grew up in a whole country, a whole ideal, a whole situation in which he thought he was doing the right thing, because only certain people needed to be free because of where they were born, or because of what they did. In fact, in the Roman society, if you lost a battle, you could go to slavery. If you were born in the wrong place, you could go to slavery. But all of this seemed to work. See, you will never see what doesn't work if it's working for you. Let me say that again. You'll never get what doesn't work until it's not working for you. Because you think, hey, everything's cool. I don't understand why I don't understand why this is so messed up. And it is weird, I know. I'm going to take this off because I'm going to die without. Okay, I'm going to take this off. I'm far enough away, trust me. And I'm not going to spit. And if you do, duck, okay? But understand this. What's very interesting, we are always shocked and surprised. Well, have you looked back to your life and say, I can't believe I thought like that? Hey, you looked at it, and thank God that, and I wasn't trying to be that way. That's the way I was. Can you imagine that just in the 1950s, they decided if you test things on men, it was just like testing them on women. It never occurred to these scientists who had PhDs, scientists who understood the human body, thought if they tested drugs and everything on men, that they could presume it would work the same way on women. Can you imagine some people say, I thought There are people even now teaching that, man, the slaves were cool. They were having a good time. They were better than me. You understand, you can be in the middle of a situation, in the middle of a difference, and trying to do the best things you can because of it's just the way you see things. It's not the villains that the problems are. It's the reality of people who literally must change when they don't see any need to change. Now we're at the point of our scripture. I'll go fast. We're now at the point of our scripture. Because Paul was just like Philemon. He was cool with slavery. Okay, I should say that in a much more educated way. He was okay with the institution of his society. In other words, he was cool with slavery. He had no problem with it. Because it was working for him. He had no problem because he presumed slaves were happy. I don't know how he could presume slaves were happy even though they're runaways. Okay, this makes no sense at all. I didn't tell you that evil made sense. I didn't tell you ever. Okay, this is not in an outline, but this is totally true. Folk who believe, we can believe some messed up stuff, can't we? And later on we're like, what were we thinking? Just like I just gave you an example. What were those scientists thinking that thought that women's body was just like men? You can believe some messed up stuff because it is so in you. But the way people change is usually not because of ideas, not even because they heard the right thing, but because they met the right person. I know, and I am an educated person, and I put time in education. I have been a part of educated institutions. I have been a vice president of a seminary, for God's sake. But the reality is the most powerful thing are not the words we say, not the sermons we preach, I know, not the sermons we preach, but the people we know. Our relationships, our experience, the way people love us, the way people care about us changes us. And so in prison, serendipitously, and I would believe providentially, this dude by the name of Philemon comes to jail because he was a runaway from his friend Onesimus' Onesimus, because he was a runaway from Philemon's household. He was a slave. And Paul, for the first time, is in the same condition as a slave. It's amazing what happens. When your life condition changes, and suddenly you begin to understand what other people do. I don't care how much you think you understand poverty. It is until you can't pay the bills that you can now understand it. I don't care. I really don't care how much you think you understand racism until somebody won't let you do something on the basis of something you can't change. At that point, you go, oh, I get it now. Wait a minute. It's amazing to me how people get so angry and how folks who have gone through that went like, no, chill, we've been doing this all the time. I can't believe they acted like that. They act like that all the time with me. That's what happened. He now changes his condition and they're in the same thing. And what he discovers is they're just like me. And that what's happening to him is wrong. And he tells him the gospel of Jesus Christ. This is why I love the gospel. It doesn't matter where you are. It meets you where you are. And the slave becomes free. And not only becomes free, he begins to serve and love Paul. Now, by the way, here's the deal. Here's what people don't understand. There's a friend of mine from South Africa, and when he was going to seminary, he went to seminary, and because he was a leader in South Africa, they assigned him a member of the Secret Service police that was not so secret, that was with him in seminary, because they just wanted to make sure he knew what he was doing, right? And he said, because the problem was that the South Africans couldn't imagine, after everything they did to them, that if they got free, they wouldn't act the same way. So they were scared that the way in which they treated people, this freed people would treat them the same way. They don't understand something. There's something about having been hurt, having been put into chain, having been reduced to whatever, that you're over that right now. You just happen to be free. And here's what the gospel does. He gets the gospel, and then what happens? He's going to have to go back home to his friend's household. And now Paul has a problem. Every time you love somebody and you care about something, it comes with obligations. And the obligation is to love them in ways that they may not even be able to love themselves. This is what advocacy is. Advocacy is not a political reality. It is where you stand up to your friend. You really won't know whether you believe something until one of your friends are messing up and acting crazy and hurting somebody, and you know it, and you could do something about it. Because that what you're doing is you're risking your friendship in order to do the right things. Now, see, everybody in the house is happy. I don't know how y'all feeling online, but you may be feeling a little weird right now. Because what's weird about it is because, like, how did it get to me? It was always on you. If you love something, I don't want to hear about you standing behind a table. I don't want to hear about you going to church. I don't want to hear about how much you love somebody until you are able to encounter the people that value you when you are looking at ways that they're acting when you were just like them, and now you need to help them not hurt someone. Now look at the letter. Because you know what happens? The victims or the hurt people can never raise the issue without sounding like they're being ugly. Why don't you raise the issue? Well, because every time I say something, it becomes, look, of course he's supposed to say that. Let me give you the perspective on a person of color. Okay, black people. Okay, I'm a person of color, but I'm really black. You can see that, right? Every time I raise an issue about race that anybody could raise, they say it's only because of who you are. So it dismisses you. If you were not black, you would not believe about what's going on in America. It's like, no, that's not true. Wrong is wrong and right is right. But the reality is because of who I am, I can't raise the issue without you feeling like I'm attacking you. But your friends know how to talk to you and love you and care for you and say, I am not trying to hurt you. I'm trying to help you. So look at, I go home and read this letter. And the reason I like it in Message, I know a lot of folks don't like the Message Bible, but you can understand the reason they don't like it. You really can. Look at Paul. He's like, hey, friend, how you doing, buddy? Hey, he reminds them of the relationship they've had. And he also reminds them of what he said about himself. And reminds them that I am you, you are me. Together, we good friends. We bump, we fist bump. Yo, one other thing, I'm a bro. And bro, I need to ask you something. I need to re-examine how you're treating somebody. I need for you to think about how your actions align to the values that we think we are sharing. That's very different from marching and yelling at somebody. That is the idea of loving folk and using the ministry of our friendships to help change the world. Oh, I know. You may not have the credentials. You may not be able to write with eloquence like a Toni Morrison. You may not be able to preach like a Martin Luther King Jr. You may not be able to stand and say the eloquent words or have the platform of someone on NBC News or CNN, but you have a friend and you have friendships and you have love relationships and you have power. We have power. Now, I've over-spiritualized it, but let me be very clear, because I know there are people who've done this journey in our congregation. Is there an alcoholic who have come to the point of realizing that he or she hasn't changed, that hadn't looked back and thank God for their friends? Because they were there for you? Because when you decided to change, they helped you? Helped you understand not only the addiction, but the disease. There's a difference. Because they help you understand, they evade you the ability to forgive yourself because it says it was not just an addiction, it's a disease, and we can overcome that. And this is how you do it. It's thought patterns that have to change. It's support that has to be there. I am submitting that there are people in your life who are addicted and are infected with the diseases that hurt other people. And just like that, they can't see it. They're literally intoxicated. And they can't see it. Paul was looking to this dude and said, dude, I know you don't get this. Okay. I know you don't get this, but I guarantee. Okay, that's a Southern guarantee. I guarantee you that if you do the right thing, not only will you have a different household, you'll have a better household. Now, the easiest thing he could have done is to say, why don't you free the dude? Problem is, in Roman society, if he's freed him, he would actually make him much more vulnerable. Because quite frankly, just because one person changed didn't mean the whole society would change. And in fact, by being attached to a household, he was attached to a certain amount of privilege for being in a household. Oh, you're not getting a message. How can I make this plain? Paul could have said, all I want you to do is let him go. And don't do the work of changing your household. Because when the slaves went back to the household, it didn't just change Philemon, but the longer he was there, it changed everybody in that household. And everybody in every relationship, because we're all relationships. Imagine what happens, and I've had this time in my life where I had people who looked at me and they said, 30 years ago, I wouldn't have been your friend. And I 30 years ago, I wouldn't have wanted to be your friend, but I'm your friend now. Because you changed and I've changed. And then inevitably, their grandchildren are different. Their children are different. Their world is different. Oh, you're not getting the message. The easy thing is to say it's wrong. The hard thing is to keep loving somebody and keep loving in relationship until we all become different by our connection to one another. So he says to Philemon, look here. Free him in your mind. Free him in your heart. And you will become free. And now the denouement of the text. The last thing. The thing that after that's the crescendo. But the denouement is the important part. And this happens to everybody who tells you, yeah, but. You know they done hurt me too. You don't know what them people have done to me. You don't know. You understand that. And so Paul said, and whatever he owes you, count it to me. Whatever you thought was done wrong to you, on the basis of him being a slave, on the basis of him not loving him, on the basis of his pain, whatever pain he struck out to you because he was a slave, count it to me. Where did he learn that? He learned that because that's what Calvary is about. He learned that because Jesus says it is not that they're not guilty. It is not they're responsible. It is that radical forgiveness comes through me. Let me pay for the debts so you can begin a new relationship. Let me pay for the time when someone out of poverty may have robbed you. Let me say for the time when someone cussed you out because of racial reality. Let me pay for the time when some woman did you wrong. Don't hold it to them. Let me pay for it and receive them as a sibling. Crazy? By the way, y'all may have same siblings. I don't have a saint. I mean, my brother, I can say this because he never looks at the tape, so I can say, y'all may have same siblings. But siblings aren't perfect. They do insane and sometimes stupid things. But because you love them, you stay in relationship and you grow together. Think of the people that you normally looked at. The homeless person
who you used to look down on. Think of them as brothers and sisters. The person who in prison who actually is guilty, not the innocent ones, as brother and sister. Receive them. This is what this table is all about. It is about letting go, forgiving, and using our relationships to keep practicing love until we get it right. Shalom and God bless you.